in managed object context. So you can see I can't insert an object without having a context. The context is the hook that lets you insert things in the database or query or anything. So you have to have the context. And that first argument, @photo, that is the name of the entity. So remember in the mapping thing when I made a photo entity and I made a photographer entity, this is a string which is the name. So here I am making a photo. And what does it return? It returns NS-managed object star photo. And I told you that all the objects in the database are NS-managed objects or subclasses thereof. And in fact, that's exactly what happens. So this is just going to make one for you and return it. It's going to be blank or empty. Now, that could mean that all of its attributes are nil, but we didn't see this in Xcode. But when you inspect a property in Xcode, you can actually specify a default value, and it'll have that value. So maybe you want it to have the upload date by default be the date the object was created or something like that. You can go in and create or the date, some fixed date, or you want the title to always be at least the empty string or something like that. You can set defaults. They have to be constants, basically, in Xcode to do that. And then this object will come back with those defaults set in those fields, and otherwise nil. Okay? But if you don't do any of that default setting, all the properties in this photo will be nil. So the title will be nil, subtitle will be nil, the who took will be nil, they'll all be nil. Okay? So great, now I have an object. How do I set those attributes? I want to set the title, I want to set the subtitle, I even want to set who took. How do I do that? You do that using the key value coding protocol. And you've already used this protocol, actually. It is value for key, set value for key path, and set value for key path. Okay? So this protocol, which is implemented by NS Dictionary, for example, that's how we used value for key path in those NS dictionaries to do the things like description.underbar_contents. Remember that from Flickr? This is how NS Manage Object works. It implements all these, and you can say value for key @ title, and you can get the title of a photo. Or you can say set value, whatever you want, for key @ title, and set the value of the title. Simple as that. Okay? Value for key, set value for key. Any questions about that? Okay? So the key is obviously just a string, the name of the property in your visual map that we built earlier. The value would be just an object, like an NS string if it was the title, an NS date if it was the upload date, an NS data if it was the thumbnail thumbnail data or whatever. You can also set, using set value for key, the relationships. So if you had a photographer, which maybe you inserted with that entity description thing, so now you have a photographer as well, you can just say the photo set value, who took, set the value of the photographer for the key, who took, right? Now, what's really interesting is that if you set that value who took, the photos set in the photographer will automatically be updated. You do not have to set both sides of a relationship. And vice versa. If I have a photographer and I add a photo to its photos set, it'll automatically set who took. Okay? And that's because this database has to maintain self-internal consistency, and so Core Data does that all for you, which is really cool. Okay? So you can set either side, and it'll automatically set the other side. As I said before, the too many ones are NS sets, and the non-too many ones are just NS manage object stars. Okay? Now, all these changes that you're making, inserting objects, setting all those properties, those only happen in memory. They're not happening on disk until the context is saved. Now, the context has a save method. Okay, if you go look in NS Manage Object Context, it has a save method. But you're not going to call that because you're going to let UI Manage Documents auto-save the context. Right? So if you save the document, or you can actually send a message to the context to save itself, either way, it will save out to disk. But until then, all the changes you're making are just in memory. Okay? Now, Core Data has an incredible undo and redo built into it. You make some changes, you say undo, it undoes them. Okay? And you can batch them up, and it can undo things as a group, it can undo just the last change. I don't have time to talk about any of that, but it's really, really cool. Okay? So anytime you have a situation where you're changing database and the user wants to be able to maybe undo, Core Data is awesome for that. Just like you get or NS managed object did save notifications, you can also get UI managed document did save notifications. So you can sign up for that radio broadcast and find out when the whole document gets saved. Kind of 6 1 half dozen the other in this case, because if the documents get saved, then definitely the context is going to be saved as well. Okay. Calling value for key and set value for key like this, though, kind of results in some ugly code, because it's not type checked, right? Value for key and set value for key. That should be set value colon for key colon. That just takes ID, right? Returns ID. So it's really not type checking any of that stuff. And also you end up with a lot of literal strings like @ quote thumbnail URL. And if you ever changed the name of that in your visual map, all your code would just stop working silently and you wouldn't know. So really what we want here is properties. We want to be able to set the title and subtitle and thumbnail URL and all that stuff in my photo using properties and dot notation. So all we need to do that is create subclasses for photo and a subclass for photographer. Subclasses of NS managed object, right? And these subclasses will implement all these properties. And of course, because Xcode is so nice, it's going to do that for you. So let's talk about now how in Xcode we can make it generate subclasses for photo and photographer. So I'm going back to my visual map. I'm going to select photo and photographer. And then I'm going to, from the editor menu, I'm going to pick this all-important menu item called Create NS Managed Object Subclass. Okay? Because that's exactly what it's going to do. And when I do that, it's going to say, okay, which of your models, okay, we only have one, model.xe data model D, but you could have multiple. Which of your models do you want to generate managed object subclasses for? So we'll just pick model. And then it says, okay, well, which of the classes, which of the entities do you want to create subclass for? We'll pick them both photo and photographer here. And it's going to say, where do you want to store them? We'll store them where we store everything else. And then, bingo, photo.m and h and photographer.m and h. You see those there got created for us? So those are subclasses of NS managed object. And when you insert an object in the database, or get one back on a fetch, which we haven't talked about, but if you insert an object in the database, when it comes back, instead of being an NS managed object star, it's going to be a photo star or a photographer star. Okay, just going to automatically work. That insert entity for name method, which I can never remember the name of, that will return, if there's a subclass to be had, the subclass. All right, so let's look at the code of this. Let's look at photo.h, for example. So you can see that photo.h has made an @ property for all of my database properties for photo. See, title, photo URL, they're the right type, NSDate, NSData. Even whotook is the right class. You see, whotook is a photographer star. Now, sometimes you'll do this, and whotook will still be an NS managed object star. Why does that happen? That's because this is a one-pass generation, and if it happens to generate photo before it generated photographer, it won't know about photographer, won't be able to do this. If that happens, just go back to your map and generate them again. And this time they'll both exist beforehand, and so it'll make the right thing. Okay, so you can regenerate as many times as you want. In fact, we're going to be regenerating as we change our schema, add more entities, add more properties. We're going to be redoing that regenerate all the time. Question?
It's not importing photographer.h, it's using that @class directive. Is that just saying, I'm telling you this exists, but I'm not going to tell you where?
So the question is, tell me about that @class photographer towards the top there. Why is that not # import photographer.h? Well, in Objective-C, if all you want to be able to do is declare that something is of a certain type, and you don't need all the methods, you're not going to call any of the methods or anything like that, then you can just do this @class directive. You can do the same thing for protocols. You can say @protocol, whatever, and just declare that protocol exists. I'm not going to call any of the methods in it or implement any of the methods. And so it's kind of a forward declaration, because eventually anyone who's going to use this is going to start calling photographer methods, and they're going to import it. But this is just a way to suppress that compiler warning so that it doesn't say unknown class photographer without having to import photographer.h. That kind of keeps them independent. That way you wouldn't have to generate photographer.h if you didn't want to. If you just wanted photo, then that could be an. Although, that wouldn't be true, because then it would be NS managed object. But anyway, if you have NS managed object there, then just generate them again. All right, so let's look at photographer.h. You can see it has name and photos, right, as promised. Photos is an NS set. You see that? It also gave me a whole bunch of methods here for adding photos to the photos set. Because that NS set, that's an NS immutable set. So if I wanted to set the list of photos, I'd have to create a mutable set, put all the photo objects I wanted in there, and then set the whole thing. You know, say, my photographer.photos equals a whole set. With add photos object or remove photos object, I can just add one photo at a time, right? So it's just kind of, those are convenience methods for adding photos to that photo set. So let's look at the .m's of these, though, okay? And what do you imagine these .m's look like? Like setters and getters or @sign synthesizes or something like that? And the answer is none of that. Okay, the implementations of these just say @sign dynamic for all of the properties. Now, what the heck does @sign dynamic mean? We've never seen that before. @sign dynamic basically means, hey, I know what I'm doing. Don't generate a warning for this. Okay, and what does NSManageObject do in this case? Since there's no @sign synthesize, there's no setters and getters here, the implementation just suppresses the warning basically. And the answer is Objective-C, the runtime, has a trapping mechanism where if you send a message to an object and it doesn't understand that method, right, it doesn't implement that, it can trap and go try and figure out something else to do, okay, without crashing or saying does not respond to selector. And NSManageObject, when it gets sent a message it doesn't understand, it tries to do value for key or set value for key on it, all right? And if that doesn't work, then it says does not recognize selector. But if it does work, then it just works. Okay? So that's what's going on here. NSManageObject traps when setters and getters or any method is sent to it, and it tries to do value for key and set value for key. And if it can, all is good. And if it can't, then it says does not understand selector. Anyone understand that? So this @sign dynamic just says don't generate a warning that I don't implement the setter and getter because I know what I'm doing. Okay? All right. So now that I have these subclasses, how do I use them to access my attributes using dot notation? And so now when I say in this entity description, insert new object for entity for name in managed object context, instead of saying NS managed object star photo equals that, I say photo star photo equals that. Insert new object for entity for name, by the way, returns an ID, so the compiler is not going to warn you or give an error in either case. But if you say photo star photo equals that, then you can just say photo.title equals whatever you want the title to be. Like if I'm downloading this from Flickr, I might say Flickr data object for key Flickr photo title. Get it out of that dictionary that came from Flickr, and I'm just setting that title in my database. Okay, exactly 100% what you would think it would be. Here's a whole bunch of other examples of what you would do. You can also obviously call the getter, so I could say NSString star my thumbnail equals photo.thumbnail URL. Okay, get that thumbnail URL out of there. Notice that you can't put URLs in the database. You have to put strings and convert them to URLs. I could say photo.lastViewDate equals NSDateDate. Okay, the date method in NSDate gets the current date and time. I could set that as the photo's last viewed date. I can obviously do photo.whotook equals some photographer object, but I can even say photo.whotook.name equals the name of the photographer. So if I have a photo star, I can actually set the name of the photographer who took that photo. Okay, so I'm just using dot notation. This is a normal dot notation. It's just that photographer implements name, and photo implements who took, and who took is a photographer. Therefore, photo.whotook.name. Question?
Would this require that you set who took previously, or does it like auto-create a photographer?
Right. So the question is, would it auto-create if photo.whotook was nil? Would it automatically create a photographer in the database so that it can say .name equals whatever? And the answer is no. This is normal properties. If photo.whotook is nil, then the set name will just be sent to nil. It will do nothing.